Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, where we're helping leaders live with integrity.
Whether you're a mom or a CEO, you're a leader, and how you lead matters.
Well, I am so excited to have Amy Wolff with us for our next guest. Jeff wishes he could be here, but he's unable to join us. But that's okay. I get her all to myself. So Amy has become a dear friend, but she's just an incredible leader. She's one of those people that the moment you're around her, you want to know more and understand more about the way she thinks and what she's doing, because there's just so much that God is doing in and through her. She's just down to earth, and I think you're going to find that a lot of things that she shares today are going to speak right to where you are, and hopefully maybe kind of nudge you to take some next steps in your own journey. So, Amy, tell us a little bit about where you're at in life, maybe some of the hats you wear and titles.
Sure.
Tell us more.
Sure. I'm in my mid-30s. See how vague I was there? I'm in my mid-30s. I am a mom of two girls, 6 and 9. My husband, Jake, and I have been together 14 years. We met in high school.
Oh, I love it.
No, but we were not the sweethearts. Everyone's, oh, it's so sweet. We were on and off.
Oh, it's dramatic.
Oh. We were the annoying couple that people just rolled their eyes at. But after college, we got married when we were 20 and 21. Now we have a couple girls. I run a business with my dad. He started
family business.
Yeah,
that has a lot of stuff.
Good. I tell him I think it's been so successful when we've only gotten huge spats less than 10 times in 8 years. I feel like that's great.
That is great.
Yeah, I will brag about that. We still love each other. It's great. We do speaker coaching, professional coaching for presenters in various industries, mostly for big corporate clients all around the country. But it does also mean I do coaching for TED Talk speakers and friends at times, and get a chance to speak myself often. Other hats, I run a nonprofit organization that I accidentally started in May of 2017, and it all started with yard signs, and I'm sure we'll get to that. And I'm a Sunday school teacher. I lead teams to Rwanda almost every year, a place dear to my heart. So lots of stuff.
Yes.
Lots of stuff going on. Lots of hats.
Lots of hats. And yet there's usually kind of a red strand that goes through all of the different hats. And so what I've learned is most of the time it starts at some sort of pain point, maybe a crossroads. So tell us a little bit about that in your journey.
Yeah. I grew up in a really supportive home, parents that were really involved, to the point where I feel really confident in who I am. Raising daughters, I want to shake my parents and go, what did you do to me? How did you teach me that?
Yeah.
Like, I really never felt like I had to prove myself and earn love, nor was I able to lose it.
Wait, pause. That right there is huge, Amy. So you never had to prove yourself or earn love.
No.
Like, if you're listening and you're parenting, that's gold.
Yeah, it's interesting how it plays out currently in my relationships with my daughters. I have one daughter who is quick to learn, an overachiever, will come home and show me 100% on tests. And when she does that, I look at her and I say, if you got a C, but you tried hard, I would love you just the same as this 100% test. Well done. You're working hard, but just so you know, you can't earn it. I will love you no matter what. And someday you're going to have a test and it's not going to be 100%, and it's going to be okay. To my other daughter who struggles more with learning, she'll come in and she'll have, a piece, she's still young, but she'll have a little project and she didn't do so well, or she's a little behind. And I'll look at her and say, I can't love you any less. I don't love you any less just because this wasn't perfect. So depending on their personalities, I've had to learn it's not just, for me, I don't resonate with, I'm trying to hustle to be loved and I'm not lovable and kind of this, I mess up. And for me, it's, I like to earn it. I want to do all the right things to deserve it, to earn it. And that is a trap too. Yeah. And so I'm noticing that in my daughters that I have to bring up this concept of worthiness differently for them. One's going to try to earn it and one's going to feel like she's not worthy of it.
Well, I hear a couple of things in that, and then we'll get back to your story.
Sure.
But I hear that you are paying attention to who your daughters are so that you can tune in to what their specific needs are. That takes a lot of time and energy and intentionality. I hear that you're also saying it over and over and over again and taking the opportunities, because kids don't assume it. There's this internal shame meter, and it's very egocentric, and we think that anything, I got the C because something's wrong with me. And so to have that parent reaffirm you can't earn it. You can't do anything to take it away. So it's beautiful. So anyways, going back to your story, that plays a huge role, that your parents gave you a foundation that helped you to fly really big. And so
it's true. I felt really supported growing up. To be honest, I don't have a lot of vivid memories of my childhood. I don't know if that's because sometimes I'll just say I don't drink enough water and it's affecting my brain. I don't know. But then I've also experienced trauma. And so curious if that has in some way dampened some of my memories. But when I was 14, my brother Jeremy was 18. And after Sunday school on a hot August day, we all decided, a bunch of our friends, to go swimming at a local lake. So we went out to the lake, and his friends went swimming across this inlet while my friend and I stayed back on shore. And it wasn't too much longer later that we heard commotion in the water, which is when I walked kind of around the corner and saw that Jeremy was in the water struggling to swim back. He was an athlete. He could swim just fine. It was a longer distance than he'd ever tried to swim before. His friends, most of his friends, made it to the other side, or almost to the other side already, and were too far away to notice what was happening. One of his friends stayed in the water with him, but when Jeremy panicked, he started to tug on his friend. So his friend swam back to shore. Oddly enough, because of the way the lake is, Jeremy was actually close to shore, but it was deep. And so I could talk to him. I made eye contact with him. We looked at each other. I said, just float on your back to get strength. He tried, so I knew he could hear me, but then he would just lose his energy and slip under the water and come back until eventually he didn't come back up. When I think about that day, it's kind of from the perspective of overhead, like not through the perspective and eyes of me at 14, but kind of witnessing it from above almost. And I remember noticing people as a dive team ended up coming and trying to find him and then resuscitate him. I remember looking around and seeing people picnicking and barbecuing, and they'd walk over like, what's going on? There's yellow tape starting to come out and police involved. And they would kind of peer over, not knowing that I'm sitting on a bench nearby and who I am and what just happened. And then they just go back to their picnics. And I remember having a very distinct thought at 14, I'll never walk away. Like I'll never be able to go back to a normal. Which is true and not true in my story. But I had to call my parents. Cell phone coverage was shoddy, so they didn't quite understand what had happened before they got there. They did find his body. They tried to resuscitate him. We signed his death certificate in the parking lot at the lake. And I remember sitting in the back of the ambulance with him. He was in a body bag, a yellow, thick plastic bag, and my parents were able to see him, but they didn't want me to see him. So they were more near his head, and I was just holding onto his calf muscle through this bag. And it's just hard to wrap. There's shock. There's a lot of emotions. I have a really interesting story that sometimes I feel reluctant to share, to be honest. Not because of the trauma, but because I really felt instant peace. I feel like God spared me and protected me. And what's difficult about that part of my story is that a lot of people don't feel that way in their trauma. And it feels unfair. Like, God, why me, not them? God, why did you protect me and not protect everyone? So that's sticky for me.
That's survivor guilt.
Is it?
Yeah, it's both emotionally and physically. To go, why me and not them?
And spiritually, that feeling that way. But I had a lot of peace. People thought things were wrong. My parents asked my friends to check up on me. And I remember a month after he died, sitting in my grandparents' bathtub and praying for tears. God, why aren't I crying? This is so unusual. Something's wrong with me. I need to cry. Ironically now, my husband will say my crying is not a problem. It comes so fast. I remember in marriage counseling once, Jake was expressing how difficult it was to try to have a conversation with a wife who just wept and wept and wept. And the counselor turned to me and he said, you do cry a lot. Like, don't validate him.
Feel. Yeah, it didn't turn, the switch didn't go off.
No, it didn't numb me.
There was just peace. There was something pretty deep in you.
And it was confusing. It was super confusing. But then 3 weeks later, I start high school. I have my first boyfriend. I go to homecoming. I get my permit, my driving permit. I mean, that was an interesting stage of life to experience trauma. On the flip side of that, coming from a very supportive home where I felt loved, the distraction was kind of helpful, right? It wasn't, I wouldn't even say it was negative, but I was excited about this chapter of my life. I felt the support at home. I felt loved, and it was really crappy. I mean, that Christmas we got out of town. Like we did not want to stick around. I think we went to Disneyland, which is a little bizarre, but I mean, we were getting out of Dodge, and holidays, sucked for a long time. And we go out to the lake every year on his anniversary. And those first few years were just horrendous. Mostly me seeing my parents navigate their grief, how awful that was to watch. But that trauma did a few things for me. It made me decide a few things. I know you and I have talked about this before. It brought up 3 questions of God. Either God does not exist, and all of my life growing up in this Christian faith was a sham, or God exists and he's mean.
Yeah.
Or God exists and he's sovereign, meaning he's in ultimate control, and I cannot fathom with my brain why he does what he does or doesn't do what he does or doesn't do. And really quickly at 14, I just had decided I won't understand it. It's not okay. I'm not going to, there's a lot of cliches that people grab onto for peace. And I at 14 just refused them. I'm not going to assume that Jeremy's smiling down on me from heaven and that everything happens for a reason. And God doesn't give you anything you can't handle. Oh, yeah. You're the chosen strong one that he chose to watch their brother drown.
Say that to you?
No, but they say things.
I want to wring their neck.
But they say things like, God doesn't give you anything you can't handle. Okay, so I can handle this. Okay, so I'm strong. So because I'm strong, God said, well, I'll make this happen.
Yeah. We try to make sense of and say the silliest things at the time.
And I think it's bad theology. And at 14, I was trying to figure out the theology of heaven. So when people said, Jeremy's there right now, I'd go through scripture and go, ooh, this is kind of messy. Is he? Or I just found that people wanted me to feel good. And I wasn't, even if I'm super stubborn, so I guess this is not surprising, but I really didn't want to just take anything at face value.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if he is in heaven right now or eventually when Jesus comes back. I don't know if he can see what's going on here or if he's just a little too preoccupied with joy and peace and all the good things in heaven. And so I really, gosh, I am so stubborn, but I was very concerned with accuracy in theology. Even at that young age, I don't know why.
Well, pause for a second, because there's several profound things that I'm thinking as someone's listening and going, oh my goodness, Amy, this is horrific. You grew up in a solid, loving home.
Yeah.
And at 14, you would have had a pretty solid base at that point. And there's a couple points that are hard for us to accept. But the truth is that none of us are exempt of tragedy. None of us.
Right.
Suffering is a part of this fallen, broken world. And I think here's a beautiful family, and everyone goes, why them? Why Jeremy? Why you? And we ask why? And we don't have those answers. We don't know. But I also hear you're a bit of who you are and your wiring, the stubborn. But I would say you ask good questions. You want to know the why, but you want to know the depth. You don't want to just take the surface answers. And so at 14, it stirred something in you that a lot of 14s aren't thinking about because they are going to homecoming and they're being kids, which is what they should be doing.
I remember at 14 having a few clear thoughts that, looking back hindsight, that's a miracle at 14 that I even had them, which is, number one, I don't know how much time I have left, so I'm going to make it count. Immediately at 14, urgency. I had a sense of urgency. That means that I was probably impatient before, but I really feel like there's going to be a funeral someday. What are people going to say? I hope it's not that she was successful and a great businesswoman and really good at house decorating, although I wouldn't mind that because I really love house decorating. But I want to have it impact, or what's this about? I just really clarity 14, urgency and clarity make my life count. I don't know what that is. It's not earning anything. It's just making this matter. And I would say that's played out in a lot of the other things I'm sure we'll get to in my passion projects and my work. And I really feel peace of mind that if tragedy did happen and my life, my days are numbered sooner than later, I really feel like I checked the box of I tried. I really tried. I lived outward generosity, and with my time, I invested in people. I did a ton of things, but I took care of my family. Like I checked the box. Not that I've done it, but yep, I tried hard. I tried my best. And I feel, man, that's so comforting. I'm not perfect. We can get to that. But I really feel like losing Jeremy gave me some really clear focus.
It does. It makes the main things the main things.
Yeah.
It really brings, that finality to our life that a lot of teens don't have yet, literally from brain development. They're still not thinking long-term in their consequences. And you had some really hard life truth at a really young age. And so that's 14. And it sounds like it intensified your drive.
Yes.
That was already there. I think God designed in you. So it didn't come from that, but it definitely intensified it and it focused it. And it focused it, it sounds like, on your family and on making, living outward, I heard you say.
In May of 2017, we had a string of suicides here in our small town. I remember we were at church small group, just kind of shooting the breeze before we were getting into book discussion. And one of our friends, Mark, is a teacher here, and said, you guys wouldn't believe the suicide rates. I don't resonate with self-harm ideation. I've never struggled with that or mental health. I'm not qualified. I don't have a psychology degree. I'm not a therapist. I was a young mom, super busy, day job, travel, volunteering here and there. So I'm not qualified. I'm a little too busy. I don't even know what I would do to help, but this very compelling feeling of do something, which is kind of my MO. If our small group, we read a book about human trafficking and it was super messy. And I remember one night looking at the group and going, so what are we going to do about it? And I'm like, what do you mean? What are we going to do about it? I said, we're doing something. So we volunteered with an organization, had their leader come and speak to our group. It didn't mean that suddenly that's our life mission.
Yeah.
But what can we do? Sometimes it's a small drop in the bucket. And then other times, like in May of 2017, it becomes so much more. I walked away from that group thinking about the suicides in our community and thought I have to do something. A couple of weeks later, my husband and 2 daughters and myself staked 20 yard signs in Newburgh with messages that said, don't give up. You are worthy of love and your mistakes don't define you. It had been an idea I'd had in my mind for years and I thought it was so random and weird.
Yeah.
And I that was my something though. I can do that. I can put them up anonymously. So we did. And instantly was a response. So 20 signs grew to 150 in Oregon within the first week, which then people would drive through the area, try to figure out who we were. And pretty soon people were requesting signs. And I came out of anonymity to facilitate the orders. And so that's why it grew, is we finally said, it was us. Here's why. We'll help order signs. Now we are in all 50 states and 26 countries in several different languages with lots of other product that we sell at cost. So we're a nonprofit organization, all volunteer-led, 3 women on the board of directors. And man, it just keeps exploding. The responses of people seeing a message of hope at the exact right time at the right place is pretty humbling.
It's super profound how small.
Yes.
And yet the profound, big impact. Words, a sign. And like you said, there's sovereignty. I think it brings us back to that principle you learned at 14 to say God's actually quite big.
Yeah.
To be able to use a yard sign at the moment in someone's life.
Yeah.
And you have to trust when that is, because you're not orchestrating that part. You're just putting the sign up.
Nope. There is this, people say, this is a hard part actually of being put on a pedestal a bit, being exposed as a leader, originator of the movement. We've done media interviews, Washington Post. This last week, I had Guidepost magazine out filming at my house, and tons of national exposure from a lot of different places, some big opportunities coming up, a book I'm writing, which I'm sure we'll discuss. It's due on Friday, so top of mind.
You're a bit busy.
Yeah, and what I struggle with is when people attribute too much to me. Like, you were so obedient to God. You are such an angel. Listen, I walked away from a small group going, what on earth can I do? I had this idea of yard signs. I had a friend find them and print them for me, and I put them in a yard. There was no special prayer time. There was no clarity. I just did it. I did it without thinking, without calculating. I just did the thing. And hindsight, I see God's hand and favor in it. It's a non-religious movement, which has been an interesting choice, but the right one. And it is such a small thing that did such a profound thing, but it's not me doing it. It's organic. People are choosing to use it as a way for their own healing. They're doing it to try to support their communities that are reeling from a shooting or a fire, or, I mean, people are using these tokens to help so many people.
Oh, yeah.
And it is bigger than me, way, 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 way bigger.
Well, I love that message, Amy, because we can start to believe our own press as leaders. And when you're getting lots of affirmation from everyone, and for you to stay rooted in that truth, to say, all I did was just put a sign up. And what that does is it tells the person, the listener, someone else to just say, really, just do it. It doesn't you don't have to have the huge business plan ready to go.
No.
There's wisdom for those of you who do that. But the organic piece of it, and I guess I resonate. I'm in the same boat. Jeff and I have really just taken one step at a time, and there's not a orchestrated 5-year genius plan. It might look like that, but that's part of just what God does. He takes the little loaves and fish and multiplies it, and I appreciate that. I also hear intentionally that you didn't make it you said religious.
Yeah.
So tell us that intention right there. I just want people to understand.
I remember asking my daughter, because they've been involved in this whole thing, seeing it happen kind of in front of our eyes. And I asked Avery a couple months after the movement was just blowing up, those first few months. I said, what would you put on a sign? And she said, with the sweetest voice, God loves you. And I thought, I'm doing such good job mothering. She knows that our surest hope is Jesus. She knows that it's his love for us. I just thought, right on, sister. So I looked at her in her eyes and I said, Avery, I won't put that on a sign. And she said, Mom, why not? Yeah, totally threw her off. And I said, because Avery, although we know where the surest hope comes from, there are people so desperate for some sort of sign to live another day, to not give up, that if we made it religious, a lot of people would discount the hope they so desperately need and go, oh, those are signs that they're that church thing. They're that faith thing, that religious thing, and they wouldn't take it. And I don't want anyone to count themselves out. And that ultimately, what I've kind of resolved to is yard signs provide some cheering and pom-poms, unexpected, and it can have a profound impact for someone who sees it at the right time. But it's in relationship that we get to tell people about our surest hope. And it's God could use a sign, sure, and he has for a lot of other ways, but I firmly believe that the most influence I have comes from direct relationships with people, and not because of a wristband I wear on my wrist.
I love it.
Yeah, so
I so resonate
I've had to struggle
with that, Amy, and yet, I could see where some of the church really struggles with that. And yet, I think it's also part of the challenge for us to recognize that God uses it all, and if it's truth, it's truth. What's so fun about your story is you're literally just doing something and then releasing it.
Yeah.
Part of that is your wiring. So I do know that. And part of that sounds like, again, your story, the pain point. It really focused things for you. Probably, I wonder about the illusion of control that we often feel. Does that play in for you?
Yeah. Control. This is why I like vacuum lines on my carpet. If my house is...
That might be an issue. We need an EMDR.
Yeah. If you come over and my house is really clean, I am, one, either really relaxed, or two, it's because everything else in my life feels chaotic and I'm trying to control something. So it's not always control, but sometimes it is. If, I get in an argument with Jake, that house is just sparkling. And so there is this element of what I can control. I would say at times I fall into this trap of trying to curate my life. Whether it's on Instagram or for me, certain experiences I want to have. And that's not always bad, but the intention is important to evaluate, and the illusion of control is real. But I deep down in my bones, I know it, right? And I know it because at 14, I knew it. There's just no control here. But it doesn't mean that I don't fall into the trap to try to scrape it up and control what I feel like I can and curate these things. The movement has been beautiful in that there's been zero control.
Right.
We don't brand anything. We don't market anything. We've intentionally let go of control, and it's beautiful.
Jinx, as our kids would say. All right, Amy, this is amazing. I want to continue. So let's move on to part 2. But before we close this one, tell our listeners, where can they learn about the Don't Give Up movement?
Yeah, we are on Instagram. Our handle is at Don't Give Up Signs. Our Facebook, if you search for Don't Give Up Signs Movement, I think you'll find it really quickly there too. Okay. And then our website's don'tgiveupsigns.com, and you can read all the stories and a video about how we got started.
It's incredible. And as a personal recipient of your speaker coaching, if a lot of our listeners are leaders and speakers, if they want to get some feedback from you and your organization, where do they find that?
Yeah, my speaker coaching business with my father is at distinctioncommunication.com. Woohoo! And there's lots of tips on there, and you can see different ways that we provide training.
Yeah. And we've provided Amy's coaching to our entire Encourage speaker team. We've given it to our Living Wholehearted team. Right. And I tell you, every time people take your workshops, they walk away saying that was the best 5 hours? How many hours we spend? 8 hours that they've ever spent. It's so practical, and you come in starting maybe at 50%, and you grow exponentially. So
thank you.
Worth it. All right, here we go. I also want you to consider subscribing to Living Wholehearted podcast, because we've got so many exciting things coming. Make sure that you put a review, because if you put a review on this particular podcast, then others are going to learn about the Don't Give Up movement. We want this message of hope to go out as far. Well, it's already out there, but
even further.
All right. All right. Thank you for listening. And again, participating in what we believe is a vision to see leaders shrinking the integrity gap between who we say we are and how we actually live.